PC Amateur Guy here. Today I'm going to talk about how to build a PC and things you should avoid. And I'm just going to share a lot of tips today if it's your first time building. Um, the first thing is decide on the case, right? That's the first thing you need to do. Whether it's like a mini ITX case, like this one here, whether it's a case with a small footprint, and you gotta basically decide on the case in terms of what you want to do with it, whether you're gonna be gaming with it, and you have to keep in mind, uh, you know, keep in mind what the purpose of the computer is going to be for, whether it's just for school, whether it's for gaming, and keep in mind the space that you have, where you want to put it. If you don't have too much space, then you might want to go with a mini ITX motherboard, which is the ITX motherboard is the smallest motherboard and it can fit in smaller cases. So decide on what kind of PC you want to build and decide on the case. There's lots of options. If you have room for a big case, that's fine. But decide on a case on something that you like have passion for it, like because it's more rewarding to build on something that you like than building in a big case that you don't like. Like the NX 410 that I built recently. It's a huge case. Like I mean, it's not that big, but compared to these, it's huge and it's gonna take more space, right? And decide on so the first step is decide on what kind of case you want to buy, and a lot of times just check the websites, check the return policy as well, in case you run into a hiccup and you need to return the case or you change your mind. You can return it in the 15 day window, but decide on like what case you want to use, right? And so that's the first step. And then once you've decided the case, go onto the website and check the specs. Check to see what it can fit. What are the measurements? So it's like kind of like building a house, right? You want to put certain parts in it. You want to put certain like a kitchen in there. You want to put in a living room. You want to put a washroom. Like how many washrooms can you fit in the house, etc. So you want to like pick the parts uh, in terms of what you can fit in it. Okay, so I'm going to open up this computer, that the Mesh Room D that I recently worked on, and I'm going to show you what parts you need to buy. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I opened up the Mesh Room D case that I built recently, and you can check my review on it on my other videos here. But so once you decided on the case, the next part you want to decide on is the power supply, and this is the power supply. There's three versions. There's like an ATX. This is the ATX version. There's an FSX, which is about this size here, so it's about a quarter of this power supply here. And an FFX L is just a little bit larger than FSX, but it's about half the size of the ATX power supply. So check your specs to see what your case can hold. If it can hold an FSX, ATX, which power supply can hold. If and then check the prices on it. Whatever's on sale, then get it. And you can decide on the power supply watts. You need the wattage, right? Typically, it could be like 450 watts, 500 watts, 1,000 watts. More is always better, but just get whatever is on sale, and you can base it on your graphics card. If your graphics card like this one here, Titan XP has 650 watts recommendation for system for the system, so I would just do at least 650. But just look at the prices, whatever is on sale. And if you're doing a smaller case like this Mesh Room D, and it can fit an FSX and an ATX, I mean, I would always go for the smaller power supply, only because it will then give this case more flexibility in terms of other things you could put in it, and it doesn't restrict the space. But if if the case only allows for an ATX power supply, then obviously you have to buy an ATX power supply. But just check the length on it. This is 16 centimeters, and so if your case can only fit up to 16 centimeters, get 16 centimeters. If your case you don't want to get an 18 centimeter length, right? Because then it's not going to fit. So now all the parts that you're going to buy based on your case is going to be based on your case's specifications. So keep that in mind. And then if you're going to do gaming, then you want to decide on your graphics card. What do you want to use it for? Like 1080p, 1440p, 4K. Then I would check the graphics card reviews on YouTube to check the frames and see which one you want to buy. And it's always a good idea to buy last year's model, because right now 7700 XT is available. But let's say you want the 6700 XT, the AMD one, check that. And if it's on clearance on sale, always get like last year's model, because it's just cheaper to do so, and it's not going to be much difference on the frames per second. And if it's on clearance, and if you're going to buy a used graphics card, make sure you buy from a reputable person, like a friend or someone on the website that has high reviews. Just be careful, there's a lot of scams. If you're building your first PC, I don't recommend buying a used graphics card, but if your friend has a used graphics card, and obviously it's your friend, right? He's not gonna scam you, then it's a good idea to buy from him, because you can save yourself hundreds of dollars if that's the case. And then another thing that you want to look at is the fans in the case, how many fans you can build in the case, something to consider. But always leave the case fans for last, because if your PC doesn't work, there's no point, right? You can have 100 fans in your PC, but the PC is not going to turn on. What's the point, right? So you don't never have to buy any PC fans cases. Just always leave them for last. Okay. All right. I'm gonna take this out here, and I'm gonna show you the inside parts. What's the next thing you need to buy? But just to recap, you need to decide on the PC case. Then you need to get a power supply that fits the case. Okay. And then you need a graphics card if you're using it for gaming. So that's the second part you need. But if you're just going to use it as a school and office, then you don't actually need that. You can just buy integrated graphics. The CPU, if it has integrated graphics, then you can just use that as an office PC. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let me open this up and show you the other parts that you should be that you need to buy next. Okay, so again, forget about the case fans. This is like more cosmetic in a lot of ways, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that you don't need to worry about case fans. Some PCs, when you're building for the first time, you don't even need any PC fan case. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but let me open this up and show you what I mean. Be right back. Okay, so I took the case fan out because I had this extra one lying around when I put it in. But you don't need this case fan. It's not important. What's important next is the CPU. CPU cooler. That usually has a fan. You want to decide on like water cooling or air cooling. But for basics, if you're building your PC for the first time, I would just do an air cooler. And you want to make sure that the height fits the specifications. Like one time I bought a cooler this high, and it was like only like maybe 2 millimeters higher than what the case can close on. And I tried to close the case and I couldn't. It was an NR200. And so something to be mindful of, if you're building like an ITX motherboard, I would always try to go with the lowest CPU cooler. This is a Noctua L9i, which is like Noctua, right? It's good, and it keeps it quiet. And so if you can do lower, is always better, because then that will give you more space in the case. And you don't want to cheap out, but when you want to install the CPU, right, the CPU will go into the motherboard, and a lot of these coolers already come with the CPU paste. It's kind of like toothpaste, so you just need to just like maybe just mark a little X. You don't need to put don't put too little, but don't put too much, because if you put too much, it's gonna smudge all over and it's gonna go on your motherboard. So just put like an X. If you're not sure how to do it, there's a lot of videos on showing how to install a CPU, but you just put the CPU, close it, and this cooler is really good. This is probably one of my favorite coolers. You just need to basically put 4 screws and flip the motherboard backwards, put the 4 screws in, and then there's a bolt that you just need to screw in on the back. Actually, 4 screws in the back is just screw in, and it comes through here. And then this is just a CPU fan that's separate. So you can change the CPU fan. It's a 92mm fan with this cooler, and you can put an RGB cooler if you like. And so that's the part number 3 and 4, which is the CPU you want to decide on, and then you want to decide on the CPU cooler. So that's another part you need. So again, to recap, you got the power supply, you got the graphics card if needed, if you're going to do gaming, or otherwise just get integrated graphics. Then so the third part is the CPU. Make sure the CPU has integrated graphics. For the first time, it's good because for troubleshooting. And there's actually, if you're building a new PC, there's like an 8600G with Ryzen that has the graphics card built into the CPU. And it's equivalent to like a 1050 Ti kind of thing. So you can play esports games. So that CPU 8600G is about $250 US. Excuse me, not even 200. It's like 180. It's like $200 US. So I would buy that if you just need it for like esports games. So you forget about the graphics card. So that's gonna save you money. And then just get a cooler like this is a cooler like this. There's a Noctua version for Ryzen. For AM5, then just use this cooler, and then you're done, right? The next part that's important is the motherboard. Again, this is an ITX motherboard because it's a lot smaller. Let me just zoom out a little bit. This is 9.6 by 9.6 inches, so 9.6 by length and 9.6, so it's a lot smaller. Again, if it doesn't really matter what motherboard you want to buy, if it's like an ITX micro or macro ATX motherboard, it just depends on the size and if it fits your case. If you get a bigger motherboard, it has more functions, more USBs, more fan connectors, so you connect case fans. But if you just want like a small PC and let's just pretend you get an ITX, that's good enough. So just get an ITX motherboard. You can get a budget one, it doesn't really matter. You get any kind of motherboard, and then so that's the next part you need. So again, to recap, you got the power supply, graphics card if you're going to use it for gaming. If not, you can even get the 8600G that includes the gaming chip inside the CPU. Again, then the next part you'll need is the cooler and then the motherboard. Okay, just wait, that is doing this video. Let me finish this video. And then so this is the motherboard. Okay, and then another thing you need is the RAM. This is the RAM stick. This is 16 gig. 16 gig is enough, and this is a DDR4. You just need one stick. If you can buy 2 sticks, but honestly, if one stick's on sale, just get one stick. All you need is one stick, and when you install this RAM, make sure it's all the way in, and make sure it's tight, right? So that's another part you need, and that's basically it, right? That's all the parts you need. Oh, sorry, and then the storage. If you're gonna do storage, I recommend NVMe. And I can't show you it here, but it's on the back of this motherboard. Sometimes it's in the front, and you just stick it in, and it's just one screw. So pretend this is the NVMe. You just stick in the it's like a rectangular thing, and it's a lot faster. NVMe, like at least 3.0, but just check your motherboard to see what it supports. If it supports 4.0, get a 4.0 NVMe SSD. Go with at least 1 terabyte. I find is more than enough, or the minimum. Don't do anything less than 1 terabyte because you're gonna run out of space very quickly, and it's a lot cheaper now. And then get that storage, okay, and then install that. And if you're not sure how to install the MMV, just check the YouTube videos. There's a lot of them, and even coolers to show you how to do that. And so yeah, so that's all the parts you need to build a really small PC. And one thing I do, or the last thing I want to mention to you is you might not be able to see this, but this, let's see if I can zoom in here. This is the power supply switch, and this computer only has one item, but sometimes you'll get an LED one, HDD one, which is just the lights. Okay. The only thing you need to plug in is this power switch, because this is what turns on the PC. Okay. So you can forget about all the other cables if you're building a PC for the first time. This is the most important step. So you just need to plug this in like this. And it's usually like all motherboards have the same front IO. They call it the front IO or the front panel, and you just need to stick it in. And usually it's like 4 pins, and then 4 pins on the top, and you won't be able to see this, and then 5 pins in the bottom, and it's always on the 4 pins. The first 2 pins to the right of that is where you need to stick that in. Okay, and then when you turn on the PC, there's a power switch that turns on the PC. If you have like lights, or if your power supply starts spinning, then you know your power supply is working. Okay, you know for sure your power supply is working, and it's not, your power supply is not the problem. Okay, but if you didn't plug in the power switch in the correct spot. Okay, and if that's the case, then you know what, just go back, check the manual, and then just make sure you plug it into the right spot, so that way the power supply turns on. If you plugged in the right spot and the power supply doesn't turn on, and there's no lights or anything, and the CPU fan's not spinning or anything, then either the power supply is bad or the motherboard is bad, right? So whenever you're buying parts, just make sure you look at the return policy. RMA, like RMA something, returning it to the manufacturer is a pain in the ass. So make sure you have a 15-day window, and make sure you have time to build a PC. So first PC is gonna take you honestly like probably a good 10 hours, even though I can do one in 1 hour because I've done like maybe a dozen PC building. But if your first one's gonna take you like 10 hours, it's gonna take very long. And so yeah, so just keep that in mind. So you should be able to like return any parts that's not working, and then every screw, like power supply screw, has different screws. The motherboard has different screws. Even this has bigger screws for the GPU. So make sure you check your manual to make sure what screw you're using. And when you're screwing it in, just screw it in 99%. Like when you screw it in just regularly and you feel that you reach the end and you can't do it anymore, then that's good. Never ever screw it too tight, because you can really strip the screw when you try to take it out, let's say later on. Or if the screw, make sure you put in the screw first to see if it actually fits, and make sure it's the right screw. If it's the right screw, then obviously that's the right screw. But don't use the wrong screw, because sometimes you can't unscrew it, and then you're gonna be messed up, right? So that's something to be aware of, and just screw it in 99%. Just once you just hit the end of it and you can't screw it anymore, don't ever over tighten screws. These things are like pretty sturdy, and so don't over tighten them. Once it's screwed in, it's good enough. It's not gonna fall off, right? If you're not tightening it, like just screw it in until you reach to that end, okay? And then that's basically it. Now, why did I mention that you don't need case fans? Because your CPU cooler, it has to be a good cooler. If it's cooling the CPU and you have a good graphics card, they already have fans built in already, and that's already gonna keep the PC already cool. Like these fans that you put in later on, it's only gonna add maybe plus minus 10%, 5 to 10% difference in your system. It's not gonna be a huge difference. So if you have, put in other words, if you have a bad CPU cooler, okay, uh, then you can have like 10 fans in your PC. It's not gonna make your PC CPU any cooler, right? It's not, yeah, because the source of it is not cooling it. So what's the point of all these other fans? So these fans are more cosmetic. So that's something you gotta be aware of. Um, and in terms of CPU choice, I will always do like more is always better if you can afford it. Like if you're gonna just need it for browsing and stuff, like I would go at least 6 core or even 8 core if you can afford it. And don't get into much about benchmarking. Benchmarking is like driving a Porsche 200 miles per hour or 400 miles per hour on the highway, right? You're never going to actually use it, and then you decide, oh, my computer's too hot, and then you have to get a bigger cooler, and then you're wasting money because the average Joe or Mary, that when they're driving the highway, they're only going to do like 80 miles per hour, right? You're never going to go 400 miles per hour anyway. So what's the point, right? Don't get into much benchmarking. If you once you turn your computer on, I would go into HW monitor, check your CPU, use it for like gaming or whatever for like maybe like half an hour, and then check your temperature. If your temperature is like less than 90 degrees, then it's good enough. But if it's going to the red, like 100 degrees, then it's thermal throttling. That's probably something beyond basics. But my point is that you could build any PC, right? And anyone that says you can't, just tell them shut up because they don't know what they're talking about. Okay? Because like anyone can build a PC. Like I didn't even know how to build a PC, but I just like went through all these YouTube videos, and I just learned how to build. Like I can build like really advanced PCs now, and RGB and all that stuff, right? But like my point is that anyone can learn. It doesn't matter if you're like 65 years old. You can do it, right? Just make sure that when you pick your case, just make sure that the parts will fit into your PC. That's the most important thing. Decide on what you want. Buying last year's model for CPU is always good. More cores the better. Like if you could do like a Core i9, like a 12900K right on Amazon.ca is like $420 right now, right? That was like 2 years model, 2 years ago, and it's like a 16 core processor, right? For $400, right? That's a steal, and it also has integrated graphics, right? That's just an example. So if you always want to have more power under the hood, it's like a Porsche, right? You might not use that engine, but if you ever need it, it's there, right? So always more is better. You don't want to like buy a Honda Civic, to be honest, like a Honda Civic CPU, Core i3, right? Try to do a Core i5 if you can afford it, at least. Don't do a Core i3 because it's too slow, man. Like you can't even go through the winter with a Civic, right? You can't drive up a little steep hill. So don't yeah. So more is always better if you can afford it. But yeah. So that concludes my video. Just to recap, the parts that you need is the power supply, the case. Decide on the case, the graphics card. Get a used one from a friend if they have it. You can save hundreds of dollars that way. If you're not doing any gaming, just you can use the integrated graphics. The 8600G right now actually has integrated graphics with a graphics card built in. And then that's one last part you need to install so you can get an 8600G. Decide on your motherboard. Forget about case fans. You can always add them on later on once you get more advanced. Plug in the power switch into the motherboard. Check the manual if you're not sure what it is. You just need to stick that 2-pin in, right, and then turn that on. 86G CPU already set as an example. So decide on your CPU. More cores is better if you can afford it. Always get last year's model because it's cheaper. Decide on the CPU cooler. Make sure the CPU cooler fits inside your case. Like obviously this is more than fits, right? It's like I have all this space here, but you need to decide on yours. Check the CPU cooling instructions. See if it's complicated. This is only 4 screws in the back. Screw it in and it's done, right? It comes with the CPU, the paste that you need to paste in. Don't paste too much. Decide on the RAM. 16 gig is good enough as a minimum. 16 gig. If you can afford it, like you can go, if you can do 32 gigs, that's probably optimized. But 16 gig will do minimum for everything, for gaming, for processing, office work. 16 gig is good enough. 1 stick is good enough, to be honest. Make sure that's in tightly. And then the storage, just use the NVMe storage now. This is 2024. Forget about the hard disk drives. Even if you have an extra one lying around, don't do it. Get at least 1 terabyte for storage. And yeah, so those are all the parts you need to make a computer. And then if you want to install Windows, there's a bunch of Windows that shows you how to install Windows using a USB drive. You just need a USB drive with at least 16 gigs, and you can install Windows. One tip I want to provide to you on the Windows thing, you can buy the license for like 10-20 bucks on a lot of websites, electronicfirst.com as an example. You just check the reviews, it's legitimate. But what I'm saying is when you install the Windows for the first time, you don't actually even need the license to use Windows, right? So just use Windows for like maybe a few weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and see how it's working for you. And if it's good, then you don't even need to install Windows license, right? You can just use it as is if you're on tight budget. But then later on down the road, you can install it for $10, $20. But the reason why you shouldn't install Windows right away and get the license, you don't need to pay $300 for it, right? It's like $10, $20 for the license. Is that in case you need the motherboard is bad and you need to return it, or it goes after a couple of weeks the motherboard doesn't work well, and you need to return it or to the store to get another one because something's wrong with it. Let's just pretend, right? Whatever the reason is, or it doesn't fit your CPU, then you don't want to like pay like $20 for a license and you lost that license forever, right? You can't use that license for another motherboard. So that's something to be aware of. And then make sure, obviously, just like the PC case, make sure when you're buying the motherboard, make sure it fits your CPU, right? So if it's a Ryzen AM5, like the 8600G, make sure it's an AM5 motherboard. You don't want to buy an Intel motherboard because it's not going to fit, right? And then make sure you read the specs on the motherboard, if it has Wi-Fi or not. If it has Wi-Fi and you need Wi-Fi, get the motherboard with the Wi-Fi built in. It's easier because you don't need to worry about that and you can use your Wi-Fi. But if the motherboard doesn't include Wi-Fi, then you have to get the motherboard again. So that basically concludes my video. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, just post down, comment below, subscribe if you haven't, thumbs up, thumbs down. I appreciate you watching. See you in the next one.